Well, we're always saying that God is inviting us into what He is up to, but what happens when we feel like we're not up to the task? That's what we're going to explore today in our series, Shoulder to Shoulder. God not only gives us His presence, but His people to accomplish His purpose. And so I hope you'll lean in. In fact, I hope you'll get shoulder to shoulder with someone. Invite them to watch along with you. You can follow along in the teaching notes, and we're excited to get going. Here we go. Today's story in our series, Shoulder to Shoulder, is a set of siblings, two brothers and a sister who partner with God to do things that would be talked about over and over and over and would actually become this epic story to which everyone trying to understand Jesus would reach back to. They didn't realize it at the time, but they were living a picture of what Jesus would do, and is so helpful to every single one of us. So if you have your Bible, I want to encourage you to grab it right now and go to the second book in the Bible. So start on the left, just start turning pages until you come to a book called Exodus. We're going to go to chapter 3. If you don't have a Bible, you can scan a QR code. The one on the screen will help you, or the one on the back of the seats will help you. You can download a Bible app, or you can follow along with the second link is my notes. You'll see all the scriptures that I'm going to use today. But here's what I want to tell you, is I'm only going to fly over a couple of very important, actually three different very important moments in the story of Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. But to get the whole story, you're going to need to read a little bit more widely than that to catch the whole story of what God unfolded in their lives. And so I encourage you to screenshot, bookmark, write it down, whatever works for you, and come back to these. In fact, any of you who are jumping into our study called Shoulder to Shoulder, you will encounter these same passages this week. You'll take it way farther. We don't want to be a people who just listen to other people talk about the Bible. We want to be a people who look at what God has said, listen for who He is and who He's making us to be, and then act that out in our lives. And that's exactly what this will help you do. If you haven't grabbed one of these yet, this is my last promo and we'll dive in. I want you to grab one of these. They're going to be at the doors on the way out today. You can grab one for you, your spouse, your neighbor, your child, your parent, your coworker, random person at the coffee shop, and you could sit down and have an amazing discovery of God in the Scripture. You don't need to have any experience or any expertise. This will help guide you in listening to God really, really well in the stories of Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. Now, before we get to Exodus 3 here in just a minute, here's what I want to do. As we look across this whole series for the next several weeks, we are going to be looking in the first part of the scripture called the Old Testament. This is all of the story of God that He intended to tell us before Jesus arrives on the scene. And that's a very important realization. There's a lot to learn about God's character, why He did things, how He does things, who He is. So much value in the Old Testament. But if we don't put it in the context of the story of Jesus, we might misunderstand. You could easily read the story of Moses, Aaron, and Miriam and think that God is all about rule following. You shouldn't conclude that, but you might. And certainly if we don't keep Jesus in picture, you might do that. So I just want to rehearse something one more time that I've done a number of times. I'm going to draw a simple picture of the story of God in 3 circles. And some of you are like, I've seen this, I've seen it, I've seen it. Would you stop already? No, I won't. Because we are not going after awareness here. I'll stop when everyone has the ability on a moment's notice to share the gospel with someone in their coffee shop or their home with some sort of simple picture like this. It's not about whether we've seen it or know it. It's about whether we can share it and multiply it. So I'm going to go one more round. Now, if any of you who are just here like, dude, I don't even know your name or what you're talking about, this is perfect for you. Because this is the story of Jesus that we are living into. If you've wondered what God has in mind for you, the picture, the story that He would write in your life, this is it in 3 pictures. Here it is, picture number 1. The world we live in is broken. Can I get a yup? Right? Like, oh my goodness. It's pandemics, it's starvation, it's war, it's battles, it's theft, it's hunger, it's cancer, it's all the things. We don't need to look very far to just come to an agreement that the world is broken. But it's not just out there. Let's all just agree that the broken comes in here too. Can I get a uh-huh? This is what makes us followers of Jesus. We just recognize all the ways we try to put us back together doesn't work. So here it is. This is the world. It's got a crack in it because it's broken. And every time we try to escape the brokenness, we kind of find our way right back in. We use our own strength and we grit our teeth and we like pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and try really hard to overcome the stuff that's wrecking us. Inevitably, we get sucked right back in. And that's a really sad picture, right? But it's really real to who we are. It's a common experience for all of us. But here's the story of God. It was never intended to be that way. If you weren't here last week, I encourage you to go back and listen to the message last week. We told the story of God and the way that he intended for things to be, because God's design was good. It was for our thriving. It was full of partnership with God and with one another. There was no division, no brokenness. He intended things to be good. So if that's true, what happened? Well, in short, we looked for good without God. We tried to find good without connection and relationship with him. We tried to do our own thing, our own way, and it wrecked stuff. Followers of Jesus, does that sound right in your story? The Bible calls that looking for good without God, the Bible calls that sin, and it wrecks stuff. It wrecked what we think of ourselves. It wrecked relationships between us. It wrecked relationship with God. But here's the beauty, is that even though God made it good and we wrecked it, he still loved us anyway. And he was gonna do something about that. And so over and over in the whole story of Scripture, from beginning in the Old Testament to the end when he makes everything right, is God pursuing us and inviting us to life with him. And over, he says, turn and follow me, turn and follow me, turn and follow me. In the Old Testament, that comes in lots of packages, like, I'll be your king. You don't need another king. I'll speak through prophets so you can hear my voice. I will rescue you out of slavery. God pursued people over and over through the Old Testament. He says, turn and follow me. Now, here's my warning. Some of you are gonna read the story of Exodus, Miriam, and Aaron, Aaron, and Moses in Exodus this week. And you might draw the conclusion that the 10 Commandments are how you stay right with God. Anybody heard of the 10 Commandments? Kind of just get a head nod. You've heard of them even if you don't follow Jesus. The 10 Commandments are not how you stay right with God. They are not. The 10 Commandments are bold statements of God's values and character, and it was an introduction to a people who had never walked with God. Here's how you walk with me. But the whole Old Testament and all the rules and all the laws were intended for people to pursue God, but come to the realization that is so important, and here it is, that they could never do it on their own. This is what the Old Testament laws and rules that everybody talks so much about are about. They revealed our brokenness and our inability to overcome it. And they led up to a moment when God would do everything to make us right. And this is why we need the story of Jesus, not just the story of God before him. Because the story of Jesus is that God entered creation when we could never rescue ourselves. He took all of our sin on himself and killed it on the cross so that nothing could separate us from God. So some of you wandered in here thinking that religion is earning your way back to God. And if you read the Old Testament, you might even get that impression, and it is not. To be a follower of Jesus is to acknowledge that Jesus did everything necessary for us to be right with God. So we have nothing to hide, nothing to fear. We can come to him because of what he did, not because of what we have done. We can come to him because of what he did in spite of what we have done and expect good things from him. That God entered creation and conquered death on our behalf, and so he gets to be king. How you like my crown? You like that crown? It's solid, right? Simple drawings. You can draw it on a napkin at a coffee shop. If we'll turn and follow him, if we'll entrust ourselves to him, if we'll honor him and say, you are God and I'll follow you, then what he does is he grows us to be more and more like him, and he invites us to experience the good that God has for us. There's an arrow coming. Wait for it, wait for it, wait for it. Yahtzee. That we grow to be more and more like him. It doesn't happen overnight. Acknowledge, this is why all the people around you are still broken. Because God is not in a hurry, and he puts us back together piece by piece when we trust ourselves to God. And so we're just trying to do that more and more and more. And if you want to do that, you're in the right spot. He'll make us more and more like him, and we'll experience the good God has for us the more we go his way. But you just need to know a lot of people stop there, and that's not the whole story. The rest of the story is not just that he grows us up to be more like him, but he sends us back into the broken world with God's help and the help of his people to call them alive in him. Now, the reason I'll rehearse all that is so you never miss it in the stories we're looking at. And the other reason is this. If you identify with Jesus, there is a calling on your life to turn the world right side up. And nothing less than that is your calling. To become like him and help people know him. Everything we do should be in that direction. From our vocation, to our parenting, to our friending, to our hobbies, to our resting, everything in our lives is about coming to know him more and helping others know him more. And there is no higher calling in our lives. The moment you start to think about the weight of partnering with the God of the universe to turn the world right side up and call it alive in his name, we should probably feel pretty small. Because how could we ever do that? That's what we're talking about today. That God has called all of us into partnership with him and with others to do things we could never do without either. Partnership goes like this. It's going after God's purpose with God's people. This is what we're talking about for the next several weeks. And we're looking at partnerships to learn all that we can about good steps to take in partnership and like things we should watch out for in our partnerships. God has called every single one of us who would identify with him to be royal priests, a holy nation, living stones, like reconcilers, where we bring God to people and people to God over and over and over. And the siblings that we're gonna look at in Exodus chapter 3, we're called to do exactly that. So here's what we're gonna do. Exodus 3, if you haven't found your way there, make sure you're there right now. We're gonna look at this guy named Moses, and we're gonna look at his partnership and try to walk that right into the partnerships in our world. God has this high calling on our lives. God had a high calling on Moses' life. So here's what we're gonna do in 3 steps. 1, we're gonna remember the high calling we've been called to. Then I'm gonna ask you a simple question. What are you gonna do about your weakness and inability to not be able to do that? How are you gonna deal with that? And then 3, how are you gonna stick together? We'll get to all of it here in just a minute, but before we read Moses' story, one last question. What has God called you to do that you know you should do that you haven't yet done? Doesn't need to be massive. What's the next thing that you're pretty sure God has invited you to do, but you haven't yet done? What we see in Exodus chapter 3 is God invites Moses to do something, and it's a pretty awesome story. When you read Moses' story, here's an outline for his life from D.L. Moody. Moses was a guy who spent 40 years thinking he was somebody. 40 years then after that, learning that he was a nobody. And then 40 years discovering just what God can do with a nobody. Here's Moses' story. 40 years growing up in the superpower king's home, Pharaoh of Egypt. Followed by a massive mistake and living in exile for 40 years. Complete anonymity and unimportance. And then God shows up and invites him to do something startling. In Exodus chapter 3, you'll have to read the whole story, but I'm just gonna read a piece of it. Here's what God says to Moses in verse 7. Then the Lord said to him, I have certainly seen the oppression of my people in Egypt. 2 million people that were God's people in slavery in Egypt doing Pharaoh's bidding, the Hebrew people. And God says, I've seen their oppression. I have heard their cries of distress because of their harsh slave drivers. Yes, I'm aware of their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the power of the Egyptians and lead them out of Egypt into their own fertile, spacious land, into a land flowing with milk and honey. He goes on in verse 9, he says this, look, the cry of the people of Israel has reached me, and I have seen how harshly the Egyptians abuse them. Now go, for I am sending you. This is him speaking to Moses. God says, I've seen, I've heard, I'm aware, I'm coming, and I'm sending you to Pharaoh. You, Moses, must lead my people out of Egypt. I don't know why the God of the universe, who spoke and nothing became something, decides to use people and invite them into what he is up to in the world, but he always does. It's what he does. And so he shows up to a nobody in the desert, a 40-year past failure, and says, I'm coming, but you're going to lead. I'm coming, but you're the one that is gonna step in front of Pharaoh and invite them out. Now what follows, and you gotta read it because I don't have time, is a list of questions, hesitations, and excuses. Have you ever heard questions, hesitations, and excuses? Anyone? Anybody offered others a long set of excuses where you just kind of dance your way out of responsibility? This is what Moses tries to do over and over and over. Now, I don't know why he does this. It's not entirely clear. I got some ideas. Maybe it was 40 years of trying to forget the place that God just called him to go back to. It's where he had failed. Maybe it's a fear over stepping in front of the world superpower of the time and telling him something he didn't want to hear. Maybe it was self-doubt over his failure in the past. Maybe he was just comfortable where he was, and maybe this is a list of the same reasons you haven't done what God asked you to do yet. I don't know what it was, but here's what I would say is at least Moses wasn't sure that he was equal to the task God was calling him to. And so in chapter 4, verse 10, this is one of Moses' many excuses. You all have heard about excuses, right? We all have them, and they all stink. Verse 10, but Moses pleaded with the Lord, "O Lord, I'm not very good with words. I never have been. I'm not now. Even though you've spoken to me, I get tongue-tied and my words get tangled." Listen, just process this for a minute. The God of the universe who spoke Moses into existence, and Moses is like, you know what, I don't really speak that well. Maybe you should find somebody else. Before we judge Moses, let's remember, in front of all of us, there's probably something God has asked us to do that we haven't done yet. Moses tries this excuse, and I love his response. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Who makes a person's mouth? Who decides whether people speak or do not speak, hear or do not hear, see or do not see? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go. I will be with you as you speak, and I will instruct you what to say." Whether it's Moses being invited to lead 2 million out of slavery or you invited to do the next thing he's called you to do, God is not interested in what we think we can do. He is inviting us to experience all he can do when we say yes. When we join him in his purpose with his people, this is the partnership God has in mind for us. That we would experience intimacy and relationship alongside others, and especially with God, as we say yes to doing the thing he's called in front of us. In fact, God often calls us to do things that we are not capable of. Did you hear me say that? God often calls people to do things that they are not capable of. Anybody ever hear, God will never give you more than you can handle? Anyone? That is not in the Bible. There's not a story that sounds like that in the Bible. You know what every story in the Bible sounds like when God enters into the life of a human and invites them to do something with him? They're like, "What? Me? Are you kidding me?" There is no way the people that God invited to do things were up to the task he invited them to do. God will almost never invite you to do things that you're capable of, because when he invites you to do something, he knows that you're gonna need to reach for him. He's always gonna invite you to something that is beyond you. Did you hear that? He will always invite you to something that is beyond you, so that you rely on and reach for him and experience him in the journey. And at the same time, he'll ask you to reach for people around you to go with you, so that we find our way into relationship with others over and over and over. I just don't want you to miss this. God almost always invites us to things that at least we feel like are beyond us, so that we reach for him and trust him, and we can tell the story of how awesome he was when he carried us through when we were scared out of our wits. And there's this refrain you'll see in Exodus 3 and 4 when you read the story of Moses this week. God's first promise in the acknowledgement of fear or self-doubt or whatever keeps us from doing the next thing God has called us to do, his first answer is always this: I will be with you. Did you catch that? Who gave man his mouth? Now go. I, the one who made your mouth, will be with you. You have nothing to fear. God's first promise is always, when he invites us to do something, to go with us, because that's the point. Our first partner in God's purposes is always God. So listen, God does not expect you to go get something done on your own. He says, come do this with me. Our first partner is always him. He said it over and over. I've seen, I've heard, I'm aware, I've come down, and I'm sending you, Moses, and I'm going with you. I have come down, God says, I am sending you. Not either or, both and. So listen, I don't know if you had an answer for what you think God has invited you to do next, but I just want you to know there is an answer. Don't complicate it. If you're not trusting Jesus with your life, the next step for you is find out who Jesus is. Some of you who are like just finding your way in the direction of Jesus, your next step might be to offer the good of your life into the lives of others. There may be someone in your life that God has placed you around that he is inviting you to speak his name and draw 3 circles for them and invite them in the direction of Jesus. God might be saying, take more of your time in your calendar. I don't know what it is, but there is something in front of you. Don't complicate it. Say yes to it, and he'll find the next step for you. It doesn't have to be the same as anyone else, but I'm just saying, God has invited you to more, and he will meet you on the way. He's our first partner. So whatever it is, your best hunch about what God has invited you to do next that you haven't yet done yet is to say yes and get going. But here's what you'll see across the story of God is that he is almost never our only partner. That God, not only intertwines our life with his when we say yes, he intertwines our life with others, great partners with whom we can experience, laugh, hug, high five, fist bump, cry, figure out problems, all the steps along the way. And that's the story of Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. Check out verse 13. When Moses finally relents, after he has made this excuse about his ability to speak, finally Moses just gets honest about what we're all trying to do when we make excuses. Verse 15, Moses again pleaded, Lord, just please send somebody else. Would you just please leave me alone? Then the Lord became angry with him. And he says, all right, what about your brother, Aaron the Levite? I know he speaks well. And look, he's on the way to meet you now. He'll be delighted to see you. I love this because what you'll read if you read on in chapter 4 is that before God ever had this conversation with Moses, he called Aaron to start walking to Mount Horeb, where in just a little while after this, he would meet Moses. Aaron was on the way because God lined up a partner for Moses before Moses even made an excuse. And I just want to tell you, whatever it is that God has called you to do, he has already aligned the support you need to do that. But you won't find out until, like Moses, you start walking. The Lord became angry with Moses. Says, I know he speaks well, and look, he's on the way to meet you. Talk to him. He'll put the words in his mouth. I will be with you both as you speak, and I will instruct you both what to do. Aaron will be your spokesperson to the people. He'll be your mouthpiece, and you will stand in the place of God for him, telling him what to say. Here's the story that unfolds next. Moses and Aaron, shoulder to shoulder. One who doesn't speak well but hears from God. One who speaks well and stands next to his brother, walk in front of Pharaoh, the most powerful person on the planet, and says, would you mind letting your 2 million people free workforce just walk into the desert? Guess what Pharaoh said? Nope. And God said, I got some things to teach you. You got to read it in Exodus. I don't have time to go through it. But here's my question for you. If Moses saw his weakness and looked for a way out, what will you do when you see your weakness? Moses saw all of the reasons he could not do what God asked him to do. And he looked for a way out. My question is, what will you look for when you inevitably encounter your inadequacy to do what God has called you to do? Your fear, your self-doubt, your busy schedule, or any number of other things. There was a guy in the New Testament, a friend of Jesus named Paul, in 2 Corinthians 12. Here's what he decided to do with his weakness. We're not exactly sure what it is, but we think it had something to do with his ability to see. Now, he was traveling everywhere to tell everyone about Jesus, and he would often write letters. In fact, most of the New Testament is letters that friends of his wrote because he could not see well enough to write. And he's like, God, you called me to do this huge thing. Please fix my eyes so I can do the thing. And so here's what he says in 2 Corinthians 12. Each time when he asked God to fix it, here was God's answer. My grace is all you need. Because my power works best in what? Weakness. So if you're weak, join the club. If God has asked you to do something that feels beyond you, that makes you human. We will inevitably encounter the reality that we don't have all that we need. And the beautiful thing is, this is where God's power goes to work, both in him strengthening us to do things we never thought we could do, and surrounding us with exactly the right kind of support to do what he's called us to do, partnership with God and his people. So now, here's Paul's response when he encounters weakness, and this is like the most un-American thing you could possibly say. He says this, now I am glad to boast about my weakness. We live in a world where when someone asks you what your weaknesses are, it's like, well, I probably have too many strengths. You probably didn't get the promotion by pointing out all of your weaknesses. by wearing it on your sleeve, but Paul is just saying, listen, every time I'm not enough, it's a chance for God to show how he is. And every time I'm not enough, it's a chance to call God's people to my side to be enough. The list of people that journeyed with Paul and walked with him in partnership is too long to mention. Timothy, Titus, Barnabas, Peter, Epaphroditus, Priscilla, Aquila, Junia, so many people that he listed, and he lived in such deep community, and so many of them because of his weakness. And so listen, do not let any weakness in you or any fear or hesitation or self-doubt. When God invites you to do something, he will give you the strength and the support to be able to do that. You just need to start walking. In our weakness, let's not look for a way out. Let's not be shifty and make excuses like a child who doesn't want to do a chore. Let's trust that the God who is inviting us to do something has good in mind for us, joy along the way, and good for others. In our weakness, let's look for God's help and the support of his people. When everyone else is looking for a way out, let's look for the way maker and the people he brings alongside us. Now, I wish I had time to say this a little bit longer and a little more clearly, but I just want you to read through the story of Moses and Aaron and what unfolds next. I don't have time. There's 40 chapters in Exodus. Put it on audiobook and do it on the commute. I don't know what you need to do, but listen to the story of Moses and Aaron unfold because it's a gift and it shows God's providence. Here's the outline of the story, and followers of Jesus, see if you recognize it. An unbeatable power, beaten only by God, who sent a messenger on his behalf as a go-between between the power and the people. An exit from slavery with a passing through the waters to a different kind of freedom on the other side. With work yet to do, but nothing but God and the promised land in front of them. Followers of Jesus, are you tracking? That was the 3 circles in the story of Moses. The unbeatable power, sin, conquered by the intercessor, Jesus, who offered his life to fight a battle we could never fight on our own, which leads us to baptism, of passing through waters, and the Holy Spirit guiding every step in the direction of us coming alive in him with work yet to do and only heaven ahead. You got to read the story. You'll see Jesus everywhere. Now, it wasn't just Aaron that God gave to Moses. I want to point out one more and encourage you to read it. Again, I don't have time to tell the story, but in your Bible, go to Numbers chapter 12, so you can put a bookmark, dog ear the page, whatever you got to do, Numbers chapter 12. I told you there were 3 siblings, not 2. Moses and Aaron got tag team from the start. Moses was the one who would hear from God. Aaron would be the one who would speak to others on his behalf. But there was this third critical character, this third sibling that journeyed the whole thing with them. And she was a powerhouse. Micah chapter 6, verse 4, God says this, I brought you out of Egypt. And telling the story years later of what he had done, he says, I brought you out of Egypt and redeemed you from slavery. And I sent Moses, Aaron, and who? Miriam to help you. This leadership team was not 2, but 3. These siblings from the start. In fact, Miriam was one of the only reasons Moses was alive. Do you remember the story? You got to read Exodus chapter 1. Moses was born in a time when Pharaoh was killing all Hebrew male babies. And so Miriam puts together a basket that'll float and drops him in the river, floats him down past Pharaoh's daughter, who rescues the baby out. What a brave move by a little girl, by an older sister, right? And then once she sees that Pharaoh's daughter has picked up Moses, she approaches Pharaoh's daughter and says, hey, you're probably gonna need someone to nurse that baby. I happen to know someone. Would you like me to help? Genius. Certainly God's help, certainly God's direction, but her participation without mistake. She would take this whole journey with Moses and Aaron. As you listen through this book of Exodus, you won't hear her name many times, but you need to know she is lockstep with her brothers the whole way through. And we get glimpses along the way, like Exodus chapter 15, when she leads one of the very first Psalms of the Bible, leading all of God's people to celebrate his rescue through the Red Sea. You'll see she's there the whole time, and you'll see her pop up in Numbers chapter 12 as well. Now, this is my warning as we finish our time together. In Numbers chapter 12, it's not a positive story that's told about Moses Miriam and Aaron. But make no mistake, the fact that it's told acknowledges the importance of their roles in leadership. That this trifecta, this Moses, Aaron and Miriam each had essential and vital contribution all along the way. Now, how many of you are siblings? Anybody a sibling? Just give me a head nod real quick. I bet you guys always get along and speak kindly to one another. But that's not the story of Moses, Miriam, and Aaron. You will see, yes, some heroic actions in the Bible, but mostly what you're going to see is humans. And in Numbers chapter 12, you'll see a very human moment. But their father, God, was going to teach these siblings a very clear lesson. You'll have to check it out in the study this week, but let me just tee it up for you. While they were at Hazeroth, Miriam and Aaron criticized Moses. Ever criticized your siblings? Anyone? Yes? Okay. They did this because he had married a Cushite woman. They said, "Has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Hasn't he spoken through us too?" But the Lord heard them. I was in 5th grade when I was talking bad about Brandon to my friends, only to realize Brandon's mom was right behind me. You feel that? That's this moment. Miriam and Aaron are bickering about Moses. Like children, they mask it in a racist comment about his wife, commenting on the color of her skin, which is always vile. But then their real hearts are revealed when they say, "Hasn't God spoken through us just like Moses?" In other words, we're just as important as him. Why is he such a big deal? You guys are feeling this, siblings, right? This is very familiar. But God heard what they had said. You got to read the story that unfolds. It's just a few verses. But what you're going to see is that what so naturally happens in the fertile soil of partnership and meaningful work together, in that same soil, ugliness and division can grow just as quickly. I grew up in the Midwest where the soil, in Illinois, where the soil is like black, it is so rich. You can plant and grow just about anything, and so we did. We had a garden in the backyard, and I hated it because it was my job to go out and weed the garden. Because just as much as the things we were planting and intending to grow, to enjoy, like the blackberry jam my mother-in-law brought this week to us, man, oh, so good, so rich. The fruit of all the things, oh, it's so good. But it only comes because somebody along the way tended and watched and weeded so that what was intended to grow could actually grow. Because the same soil that will grow amazing joy and contribution and partnership will grow envy and division just as quickly. And the longer you wait to pull those weeds, the deeper the roots grow and the more destruction you do when you try to pull them. And this story in Numbers 12 is where some nasty division, criticism, and envy actually start to take root in an important partnership. I mean, no big deal. You're just leading 2 million of God's people across the desert into the land he promised them. Really? You guys are going to bicker at this point? They sure were, because they were humans just like us. So here's what I want to say to all of us. While we've been painting a picture and invite people to do the thing God has called you to do, and to trust partnership with God and partnership with his people, I just want to say that when you step into that kind of soil, the same thing that'll grow amazing joy will grow comparison and envy. And I just want you to watch out. Turn to somebody around and say, watch out. Watch out. Comparison kills partnership. This is the story of Numbers 12 that I don't want you to miss. Comparison kills partnership. All you need to do in a marriage is start keeping score, and you have begun the end. All you need to do is compete with the people around you who you are headed the same direction in, and find yourself wandering farther and farther apart, wishing instead of for their success, for their demise. You need only try to gauge who's ahead and who's behind, comparing spiritual maturity or fruitfulness or influence or impact or the reactions from other people or the visibility or the number of followers or the beauty of their pictures or anything else. And you have planted the seeds of division that if you don't weed those things out quickly, it will choke out all the good fruit of partnership that God has in mind for you. And you will not experience the joy he has in mind for you, and likely you will not accomplish the thing that he has called you to. This story, you got to read it in Numbers chapter 12. God gets serious as Brandon's mom, maybe more serious. In fact, you'll see that what looks like severe punishment is actually a gift of a loving father to discipline his kids so they don't experience all the brokenness of division and envy. He does it in just the right amount that they would feel just enough of the pain of division and separateness to desire to come back together in the way that they had started. Feeling that consequence short term was an important way that God would call them back. Listen, watch out. Tell somebody, watch out. You need partnerships, but the moment you do, envy and comparison will be at your door trying to grow as quickly, and you got to weed it out over and over, committing again, naming it, telling the truth about it, telling someone you trust about it. Get that weed out or it will wreck your partnerships. It's been a hard lesson for me all along the way because I'm a competitive person. Anybody competitive? The good side of that is the drive. The bad side is the desire for somebody else to lose. We don't want anybody to lose. In this race of following Jesus, we just want everybody to finish. We want everybody to run like they're going to win the race, but we want everyone to keep going. It's the infinite game Simon Sinek talks about. It's not a zero sum. Someone must lose so I can win. It is a keep going, keep going. This is the story of the scripture because God is the one who wins in the end. We don't need to be like caught in comparison. But there's been other times where I have stayed back from things because I look at other people like, they're so much better at that, God. Why would you want me to do that? And I'm Moses bickering with God, staying out of the good that he has in mind for me. Anybody with me? You look at somebody else like, oh, it can't be me. It must be somebody else. I'll never be like them. I'll never have what they have. This is just another version of the same comparison that will keep you from the good God has in mind for you. I was reading a book lately by a guy named Parker Palmer. Amazing book. He says this, Rabbi Zusia was a Jewish rabbi who just wisely at the end of his life was saying this. Rabbi Zusia, when he was an old man, said this, in the coming world, they will not ask me, why were you not Moses? They will ask me, why were you not Zusia? And here's what I want to tell you. God is not calling you to be someone else. God created you with intrinsic value, gifting, contribution. He placed you in a place, in a time, with all that you have around you at your disposal. And he is so stinking strong that he can take even the things you've messed up about you and the things that everyone else has tried to mess up about you. He can take all the things you don't like about you and the other people have criticized about you. He can take all the good, the strength, the wisdom, the education, all of those things, and if you just offer that to him, he can do things you couldn't possibly imagine. He's not looking for you to be someone else. He's looking for you to let him make you who he made you to begin with. And that is an image bearer. That people would see the creativity, the beauty, the generosity of God because of the creativity and the beauty and the generosity in you. Miriam and Aaron forgot. They weren't supposed to be Moses. They were supposed to be Miriam and Aaron, and they had essential contribution just like you. We cannot let what we don't have keep us from bringing what we do have and trusting God every step along the way. God is not offended by your limits. They are a gift that will make you reach for him and reach for others. Because when you do, he has joy with him in mind. And when you reach for others, he has joy with them in mind. That their contribution to you and yours to them comes together to do things you could never do without in the direction of what God has invited us to do. There is joy in partnership. You have something to bring. And there is freedom in partnership. And you don't have to bring it all. So bring what you have. What is the thing God has asked you to do you haven't done yet? If self-doubt has made you stop, ask God for strength and someone to help. If comparison has kept you sidelined, knock it off, get in the race. Will it be easy? Nope. Will it be convenient? Probably not. Will it scare you? If it doesn't, it's probably not God. And yet, he promises joy on the other side, joy with him and joy with others. So here's what I want to encourage you to do. I want to encourage you to take just a moment and reflect on a couple things. If you haven't yet answered the question, what has God invited you to do that you haven't done yet? Would you just tell God any excuses you have left and ask him what he has to say? What is keeping you from saying yes? Just ask him. Be bold like Moses, have a conversation with God, be honest with your excuses and your reasons, and see what he has to say. My guess is he'll strengthen you, encourage you, maybe even ask him for a partner to come alongside you. Maybe like Aaron, that partner is already walking in your direction. If it's fears, if it's limits, I hope we've taken those down just a little bit. Commit to begin again. But I want to speak just really pointedly to a few others really quickly. Is there anyone who has fallen into the trap of comparison or criticism? Was something stirring in you about your relationship with someone else as we talked about the way these siblings interacted? I'm just going to tell you, God is very serious about unity. He's very serious about us. We talked about this at length last week, acknowledging the worth and beauty of everyone around us and drawing the best out of them instead of trying to press them down. If you have fallen into the trap of comparison or criticism, whether you've let it release some really ugly words to others or behind their back, or whether you've let it keep you diminished and withdrawn, would you just, the Bible word is confess. Would you just tell God that? Just say, God, I acknowledge this has been happening. And ask for some help. Ask for forgiveness, because it is offensive to God to diminish, criticize. You gotta read Numbers 12. It's a big deal. And certainly it's a big deal, followers of Jesus, because in just a moment we're gonna sing a song, and just after that song we're gonna take communion. And God is very serious about communion being communal. And disunity displeases God. And so if we've been contributing to that, if we've been the weed in the garden, we need to ask God to uproot that. We need to tell the truth, to acknowledge it. Maybe you need to go a step farther. James says that we should confess our sin to one another. If comparison, criticism, and competition is wrecking you, send a text to a friend right now that you want to have a conversation and ask for their help. To say it out loud so they can remind you God forgives you, God is strong, and he will walk with you, and so will they, into a better way of speaking, living, and contributing. So whether you're finding your way into God, the contribution God has for you, or you're finding your way out of criticism and competition, I encourage you to have an honest conversation with God, so that by the time this next song is over, we together as a family could stand up and celebrate that the one who rescued us back to God together in communion.
So this week, let's spend some time looking across our lives, asking God, what is it that you're calling us into, or who are you calling us alongside? And anything that might be in the way, let's invite God to help us address that with our people. If we can be any support to you along the way, we would love to. Head over to canyonridge.org. You'll find everything you need to know, along with a way to get in touch with us. If this was helpful to you, I encourage you, share it with a friend, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. We'll see you soon.